Richard Byrne, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm super excited that you're here today, Richard. You and I have had the chance to get to know each other a little bit over these last few months, so I'm really looking forward to our listeners getting that same opportunity. And before we get into all the cool stuff that you're working on, Richard, I'm going to start off this podcast the same way I start off every one of our interviews. And we're going to start with the most important question that you're going to get asked today. It helps to set a bit of a tone for the rest of the interview. It's also, quite frankly, the question that our listeners want an answer to. So with that, Richard, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
Yes.
Okay. It's a great answer. You're in the majority. It's a slight majority, but it is the majority, and one that I believe that our listeners and myself are also pro pineapple. So now that we're on board with you, Richard Byrne, can you give us a bit of a background? Who is Richard, and what are you doing for work right now?
So a little background on me. Let's see, where should I start? I'll start way back in college. I went to college to study history and go to law school, and I didn't go to law school. I discovered teaching instead.
Nice.
Became a high school social studies teacher, and I did that for about 10 years. And then I spent 8 years working as an independent consultant, working with schools all over the US and Canada, including as far north as Grand Prairie, Alberta.
There you go.
And as far south as Key West, Florida, and everywhere in between. And then for the last 2 years, I have been a high school computer science teacher in Western Maine, Oxford Hills Comprehensive High School in Western Maine.
Yeah, fantastic.
That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so, Richard, between your work within the classroom and then supporting the classrooms as a consultant, you've been able to display and develop a number of these core competencies and 21st century skills that we'd love to talk about. So quick refresher for all the listeners. Season 1 of this podcast was interviewing industry professionals. So the CEOs and the hiring managers to learn a bit more about what 21st century skills that they're looking for when building out their 21st century teams and what they look like in action. Because it's really easy to tell our students, you need to be a critical thinker, you need to be a problem solver, but what do those skills actually look like on display? So we figured that out. We kind of have a better sense now of what our employers are looking for. Now we're having a conversation with season 2 about what some of the amazing educators are doing in the classroom to help students develop those skills. Because there are some amazing stories happening, but oftentimes, at least in my opinion, those stories are siloed. I'm privileged with the company that we're working with. We get to have those conversations with educators across North America. We're now trying to amplify those stories so that other teachers, a teacher listening to this, for example, can hear your story and kind of borrow and steal an idea about what they can do in their classroom to intentionally help develop these 21st century skills in their students. So Richard, just to put you on the spot, what's an example of something you've done in your class over the years to help your students develop some of these core competencies?
One of my biggest focuses in helping students develop a 21st century skill, and I kind of almost hate using 21st century skill in the year 2021. It's like, yeah. Okay, but to use a modern skill, a modern competency is search, and getting students to get beyond the first couple pages of Google search results, because particularly a high school student today has not known a world without Google. And doesn't know a world where you can't pick up your phone and speak a request and get some information spit back at you. But that doesn't mean you know how to search, doesn't mean you know how to vet information, doesn't really mean that you know even how to search. Right? So one of my big things is getting students to go beyond the first couple pages of search results. And this is a skill that applies whether you're teaching history, language arts, computer science, math. It doesn't matter where you are, you want your kids to develop this skill. So one of the things that I've passed along to many teachers, I would conservatively say hundreds of teachers over the last decade, is the idea of giving students an interesting search challenge that can't be solved with just one Google query.
Cool.
I mean, they have to go through a few different steps and use a few different parts of Google's advanced search menu. So for example, I like to take pictures of interesting things, like really big, interesting things, like the giant truck in Sparwood, British Columbia. I've used that one a lot over the years. Take this picture of this giant truck and then have students ask, okay, what do I want to know? What do I want to know about this? Right. Like, and I've had students ask some really interesting questions over the years. I had a kid ask, how much poop can you haul with it? And then there's a typical, can you drive it? How big is it? Right. There's those typical kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Those kinds of questions that aren't necessarily a quick Google search of how big is the big truck, right? Or how much poop can you put in the big truck, right? That's not something that kids can do quickly. So I'll have them look at that big picture, ask these questions, and then go through their inventory of information that they have in front of them and search tools that they have in front of them to get to the conclusion of that search. And I'll give a shout out to Dan Russell, who recently published a book called The Joy of Search. Dan Russell's official job title is Google's head of search user happiness, I think is his official title. And I met him more than a decade ago and been a big fan of his work. And it's really influenced a lot of those kinds of activities I've done with kids. So the big thing you can borrow, steal, share, take from this is give your kids a really big, interesting picture. Let them ask interesting questions that aren't easily Googleable.
Yeah.
And then walk them through the steps of, okay, thinking about, okay, what do I know? And what do I really need to know more about in order to get to my answer?
That's a really cool story, Richard. And there's a lot of companies that are tied into that, right? There's critical thinking, right? There's probably the conversation of being able to tell which result is the one that you're going to want to spend more time on, and is it factual, all that kind of amazing stuff that's built into that as well. So we'll link to that book, The Joy of Search.
Yep.
In the show notes. I bet there's some amazing takeaways for teachers to even better to be able to apply kind of the example that you just shared. So thank you for that. So Richard, amazing story. It was so amazing that congrats, you've now been promoted to superintendent of your school board. For the next 10 minutes. Yeah. So
the next 10 minutes.
The next 10 minutes. And you've been tasked already with deciding which competency. So one of these 21st century skills can't be searched because we just talked about it. But if you had to pick one, all of your grade 12 graduating students have to display evidence of this skill in order to graduate. What is that skill?
So if I can't say search anymore,
yeah.
That would be my first one. My second thing would be being aware of your digital footprint and managing your digital footprint, being able to manage your digital footprint in a responsible manner, so that when my grade 12 students leave school and they're applying for college, an internship, a job, so that those things that they did when they were 17 on summer vacation, that maybe they shouldn't have Instagrammed or Snapchatted or TikToked or MySpaced, don't come back to haunt them. No one MySpaces anymore, except for Justin Timberlake. But yeah, I would say that would be the big one. The students know how to manage their digital footprints and be aware of the digital footprint.
Yep, that's a huge one. And I can tell you, as somebody who has just interviewed a bunch of hiring managers and someone who's hired a bunch of people for our team as well, that we do look, right? People are looking, they're coming back to search. We're Googling your name, and we're trying things a bit more creative than just Googling, right? Because I mean, you see it in the news all the time right now. There's demons from years back that'll come up and haunt people, right? So you got to be very intentional. You always got to be thinking 10, 20 years ahead. Like, would I regret posting this in 10 years from now? It's probably a good question to ask yourself before you click that send button, right?
And on that note, I just saw a job application a couple of weeks ago that actually stated, is there anything in your past that would reflect poorly on our organization if it was discovered?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Bring it up to the surface now. Don't waste everyone's time and figure it out 2 years later when somebody else finds it. Right? Okay, Richard, let's shift gears. Let's do some rapid fire questions for you. So what's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but maybe that you wish that you were?
Money management.
Yeah. It's tax season. We were just talking about it, right? So financial literacy is the most common answer we get, and for good reason. I feel like we're starting to get better at it. You know, I just was talking to my brother. My nephew's 10 years old, and they were doing some activities in their class, learning about credit and debt and why you need to pay back your credit card on time. And so it's amazing that they're having these conversations that early, but still definitely a long way to go. So money management's a good one. You have a billboard. Everyone's going to see this billboard, and you can write one thing on it. What does it say?
Exercise.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Everything, like your body, your mind,
all of it.
Yeah.
It's all good for you. People
What's your-
people have a tendency to avoid things that are uncomfortable. So do them. It'll make you better in the long run.
Yeah.
Go for a run, go for a walk, read a difficult book, read Tolstoy, whatever.
Yeah. Are you a jogger? Is that your thing, Richard?
I do not jog unless I am at a hotel that has a treadmill and not a bike.
Yep.
But I do bike a couple 100 miles a week.
Oh, that's fantastic. I got mine hooked up right now in the spare room to the trainer, so we could use it a few times over the winter, but I'm looking forward to getting it back out and starting my mornings off with a nice ride. Yeah. You can only pick one, IQ or EQ. Which one are you picking?
I'm going to go with IQ.
You're going IQ. Okay.
Go with IQ.
All right. Richard, did you have a favorite class in high school growing up?
It was either history or marching band.
What did you play? Do
Played the tuba.
you still play tuba?
No, I don't. I wish I
No.
could. No, I don't. In fact, I briefly thought about majoring in tuba performance in college. And I
Yeah.
realized that job market's even smaller than the job market for history teachers.
That was probably a good call. Yeah. Okay, Richard, we just talked about reading a little bit, right? So what's a book that you've read that has had such an impact on you that maybe you wish you would have read it before you turned 18?
The Wealthy Barber.
Okay. What's that about?
Getting back to money management and saving money and the ideas of investment and compound interest. And it's a really it's a simple read. I actually discovered it when I was teaching high school. I wish I had read it before when I was in high school.
Yeah. Okay. Wealthy Barber. We'll link to that one in the show notes as well. Richard, you have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the education system as we know it today. What are you changing?
I would change grade-based promotion, meaning that you don't just move along because you're 7 years old, therefore you should be in grade 1, or you're
Right. Would you swap it out for something like a proficiency or?
Yeah, I would swap it out. I would swap it out more for a looping model or a proficiency-based model where, more of the one-room schoolhouse type of approach.
That's cool. I like that. Okay. And then, so Richard, close it up. You're doing some cool stuff. I'm a big fan of your YouTube videos. I'm on your newsletters. Where can people go to learn more about everything you're working on right now?
The best place to go is to go to practicaledtech.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. Practicaledtech.com. You sign up for my newsletter. I have a daily blog that's available at freetechforteachers.com, or you can find me on YouTube or Twitter. My Twitter handle is @RMByrne. It's RMByrne, BYRNE.
Yep.
Or just
we'll
Google my name and see what comes up.
There you go. Put your search in practice. Yeah. And we'll link to all of those in the show notes so that you can search. You should search. You get better at your search, especially after reading the Joy search. But you also have the links in the show notes if your skills aren't up to par yet. Richard, I can't thank you enough for taking the time this morning, man. I really appreciate it and highly encourage everyone to go check out the resources that Richard is cranking out. If you're an educator listening to this, you're going to take away a lot of practical tips about some of the tech out there that's going to help support you and your students and achieving the goals that you want within your classroom. So Richard, thank you. Have a fantastic day and we'll talk soon.
Thanks. My pleasure.